we don't know how, the voice said from the planet. We don't know how to set up a giant electrical field. So Darth explained, you have to set them up, the magnets, the electrical magnets, in a huge circle around the perimeter of the planet. That is to say, around the equator or the outside of the planet. And turn them all on in the same direction. This will create a giant field which should protect your planet from any sort of electrical interference from another dimension. This is something that Darth had learned when studying to be a dimensional lord. Joe learned it too. And so they said, "Will do," and they signed out. And so the people of the planet started setting up this giant force field out of made from a giant electrical field. And sure enough, the shimmering on the planet lessened, and suddenly they could see that the waves, the shimmery waves which were coming toward the planet, seemed to be bouncing off the planet. And they looked and looked, and they saw some sort of spaceship appear, and it looked like it was a source of these shimmery waves, and it just fizzled in like it was unfolding from another dimension. That must be it. That's the source of it. Luckily, Darth and Joe's ship were in a cloaking device, so whoever just appeared couldn't see them. So they flew right up next to the ship, and they said, "This is it. We're going to have to transport aboard that ship and see who's aboard and see what's going on." And in the meantime, they noticed. Joe said, "Look, what's that on the screen?" And they saw a huge web that was just floating. Had been on the other side of the planet, but when the planet turned, when they flew up toward this other ship, it revealed itself. It was a giant web, bigger than a planet, and it was just held in place. "Huh, that's interesting," said Joe. "Looks like somebody's trying to catch somebody in a web." "Yeah," said Darth, "that must be part of the trap. That must be why this planet is under attack." The web, you see, was floating in space behind the planet. So somebody was attacking the planet with this dimensional beam and trying to get to somebody else, maybe Darth and Joe, to come and rescue the planet. And meanwhile, there was this huge webbing waiting for them on the other side of the planet. Well, now Darth and Joe could see the web because they were where the source of that beam was coming from, this new ship that had just appeared. So Darth and Joe flew up right next to the ship, and they both transported into the ship, which was very dark and smelly, had a familiar smell to it. They said that wasn't a sniffle, that was more of a smell. They were smelling it. And Darth whispered, "Doesn't smell very good in here." "No," said Joe, "it smells familiar." And they walked up to a control room, and they looked into the window, and there they saw him, sitting at the control panel, wearing a black cape. And Darth pushed open the door, and he swung around and stood up. "Dr. Doom." "That's right. How did you get here?" said Dr. Doom. "Well, we have our ways," said Darth and Joe. "Oh, yeah," said Dr. Doom. Could you explain yourself a little better than that?" "I was going to trap you once and for all. This was the perfect trap. I knew you would come to rescue these people. I knew that if you saw it was some sort of dimensional trap, you would come, and I would be able to get you with my webbing." "Oh, the webbing. Well, it's all over now, Doom." "Is it?" And suddenly disappeared in a puff of smoke, and he peered behind them, took out a double-bladed lightsaber, and said, "Prepare to die, Joe and Darth Vader." And they started battling him, and he was actually pretty good. He had been studying the art of Jedi fighting with a lightsaber. He apparently had met some sort of dark Sith and studied with him, because he was able to fight Darth and Joe for a couple of minutes before Darth and Joe got the better of him and managed to they both hit at the same time. They both hit his lightsaber, each one of them on a different side, out of his hands. And Doom said, "Oh, you haven't seen the last of me." "No, we think this time we have," said Darth. And Doom said, "I can blast you." "But you won't, because you know that we can blast you back from our last fight, don't you, Doom?" "Darth and Joe Vader, I will destroy you someday." And Doom went up in a puff of smoke, and Joe looked at the instrument control panel. Look, one of the escape pods. It's starting to leave the ship. And sure enough, Doom was aboard one of the pods. Ah, that's all right, said Darth. Let's get aboard our own ship. I'll set this one to fly into the sun. It'll be destroyed. And so he set the controls of the ship to fly into the sun. They transported back to their own ship. But before they transported back, they hit a switch on the control panel. What's that switch? Asked Joe. Look, it says something about the net control. I figured it might be useful. Good thinking, said Joe, and they transported back to their own ship, and they flew away from the planet, and they saw Dr. Doom's escape pod flying past on the other side of the planet, but they had activated the net with that control switch, and the giant webbing that Dr. Doom had planned to catch Darth and Joe in, it started folding around the escape pod, and they could hear over the radio Doom yelling, "No, no, not in my own webbing, no!" And Doom's space pod was completely engulfed in this webbing that he had set up as a trap for Darth and Joe. And his old ship, his mothership, flew into the sun. The dimensional attack stopped on the planet, and Darth and Joe were now heroes on that planet. And Doom was trapped inside his webbing. So Darth and Joe contacted the dimensional police, which towed the webbing back to their own headquarters in the 15th dimension, and Doom was transported out of there and put into a 17th dimensional prison, which was actually one of the most incredibly difficult prisons for anybody to get out of. And Doom, there's no way they could get out of him because they put a force field around, so he would not be able to use his usual puff of smoke disappearing trick to get out of the prison. Plus, it's 15th dimensional, and Doom has no idea. He might have known about opposite dimensions, but he's never been on the 15th dimension before. So that is how Darth and Joe finally beat Dr. Doom and got him in prison and saved planet Teflon 4 and learned about the opposite dimension on the day that Trithi went to the doctor. The end. Once upon a time, when Darth and Joe were 7 and 5 years old and they were on vacation from the Jedi training planet, 3 supersonic pterodactyls flew overhead. They were on their home planet, by the way. Darth and Joe, not the supersonic pterodactyls. Well, they didn't think much of it. They were busy watching their breath because they noticed that it was cold enough that their breath was creating steam. So they were watching their breath, and Darth and Joe had been, the previous year, they started doing this thing when it got cold where they could make certain shapes with the steam from their breath, and they were making letters. A, E, I, O, U. They were making vowels that would float through the air by shaping their mouth a certain way, just from the steam coming out of their mouths. They thought, well, this might be useful someday, at least it's fun. Maybe they can enter into some sort of steam letter forming contest later on. So they were on their way home. They had been out playing for a while doing this, when suddenly nothing in particular happened, so they kept going home. And when they got home, they decided to eat a big purple rhubarb pie because it reminded them of Purple Mountain. And they, in fact, Darth and Joe made this pie themselves, and they shaped it in the shape of Purple Mountain. And it was quite a good pie. They were very proud of it. It might not have been quite as good as the pie that their mom made, but it was a pie that they made themselves. And since they didn't have as much experience cooking as their mom, they were very proud of themselves for having made it. So they decided to go out, because now they were full, and they decided to go out to the woods to look for chirpmunks. Now, you've probably heard of chipmunks, but chirpmunks are small. They're as small as insects, but they're actually mammals, like chipmunks, but they make chirping sounds. Chirp, 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 kind of like crickets. And they decided to look for chirpmunks, and also they were religious monks. They lived in a monk home. And they decided to look for chirpmunks because chirpmunks knew how to burrow underground and create tiny little tunnels, and they thought that maybe they could hire some chirpmunks to help build tiny little tunnels in their pit of death, because that would be cool in case they ever got any tiny little visitors to explore their pit of death, because all their rooms and corridors so far were really big. So Darth and Joe found a bunch of chipmunks, and they started talking to them about the possibility of them coming to work for Darth and Joe for a little while, building tunnels in their pit of death. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Darth and Joe and the Chipmunks. Well, about 7 little chipmunks, each the size of a cricket, came to live with Darth and Joe at their pit of death for a little while. And they went to work right away digging tunnels. Now actually, chipmunks are a little bigger than crickets. They're more the size of grasshoppers. Well, Darth and Joe were very pleased, because sooner than you can... And by the way, just to interrupt myself here, that is about an inch tall, a grasshopper. But as soon as you could say Sasquatch begosh, Darth and Joe looked down, and there were hundreds of little tunnels through their pit of death, very, very small, that the chipmunks had built. Darth and Joe were happy about that, and they fed the chipmunks. Of course, feeding chipmunks is called fading. For some reason, they call it aiding instead of eating, and so they fed the chipmunks some delicious clover grass that the chipmunks loved. We love this clover grass. And they ate it all up. They were very happy, and they went home. They said they would come back next week in case the tunnels needed any maintenance work, or in case they wanted more tunnels. Well, Darth and Joe opened up the pit of death like normal that day, except they put an extra sign up saying, "Very small visitors welcome too," because they were hoping that in case anybody was very small, that person should feel welcome at their pit of death, now that they have special small tunnels for them. And so sure enough, Joe was sitting at the front desk, and some people came up, and the usual people came. Old Florby McGorby, he loved the pit of death. So some more people came to visit the pit of death that day. Joey, Johnny, Dee, and Tommy, the main 4 Ramones, came. They loved the pit of death. And actually, sometimes more Ramones than that come, but these when they first started coming, the Ramones were kind of scared of the pit of death, of the fake pit of death. But now they've been there a lot, and they proved themselves in a previous adventure. They were all able to get really high scores in the pit of death. So now they were very confident, and they went, and sometimes they would bring friends with them. Like Raphael McGuire was a friend of theirs who came with them that day. And Raphael McGuire had only been in the pit of death one time before. Joey Ramone brought him into the pit of death. This time, all 4 Ramones were bringing him in, because they thought, oh, Raphael, you'd like to go again. He was afraid to go by himself. He wanted somebody to guide him there. Well, that's enough people, they thought, for the pit of death for that day, because they usually just have 2 groups. Except after they were in there, sure enough, a group of 3 lizards slithered up to ask if they could go in the pit of death. And Darth and Joe said, they can communicate with lizards because they're googs. Well, there already are 2 groups, one group of 1 and one group of 5. But since you guys are going to be in the small tunnels and the big people can't fit in there, I guess that's all right. You guys can go in too. So they let the 3 lizards in. Their name were Hinky, Binky, and Twinkie. They were actually cousins. Hinky, Binky, and Twinkie were the 3 lizards. They looked pretty much like salamanders. They were about 2 inches tall, pretty thin, and they slithered in to the small tunnels in the pit of death. Okay? So Darth and Joe were watching at their control panels, because they could see everything that went on in their pit of death. And they saw that first guy was pretty much going through all right. Dome-be-dome-be-dome. And his name, as you might recall, what originally might have been Florby McGee. His name was now Fleeby McCow. Fleeby McCow, see, he was a trombot. A trombot is part human and part robot. They're called trombots. And one interesting thing about them, which you may know, is that they change their name all the time. So that now his name was just Bart. Anyway, Bart was a big old guy walking around in the tunnel. He went in first, so he was way ahead of the Ramones and their friend, and whose last name was McGuire. He had also changed his name to Alfonso McGuire. So it was the Ramones and Alfonso in one part of the pit of death, and Bart in another part of the pit of death. They were wandering around the tunnels, and Bart was down to level 2. So anyway, as I was saying, Bart was on level 2 of the 4 level. Now there are actually 5 levels in the pit of death plus the small tunnels. Bart was on level 2, and he was walking down the corridor. He had already had been chased by some goblins, so he was a little bit nervous when suddenly a door opened up, and he looked around to see who was there, and a voice said, "Dobby Dobby Do!" And Bart jumped in the air, and Dobby Dobby Do was very happy about it, and he said, "Dobby Dobby times it! No, Dobby Dobby Do have it! Dobby Dobby Do! Dobby Dobby Do!" And Bart got scared again. He started running in circles, running circles, and he bumped into a wall, and he fell down, and he started sliding and rolling downhill, and he landed in the marshmallow pit. And he didn't know how to get out. Help? Help? Uh-oh, how do I get out of here? Said Bart, whose name had already changed to Mart. And so, meanwhile, the Ramones were just getting down to level 2. They had been level 1. And so the Ramones were getting down to level 2, and they were having a good time showing Alfonso the way around, when suddenly they saw somebody jumping up and down who was very happy. It was Dobby Dobby Do, and Dobby Dobby Do, who knew the Ramones, would say, "Dobby Dobby 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 Do, Dobby Dobby Do, Dobby Dobby time is it? Oh, Dobby Dobby Toe, Dobby Dobby Toe. No, Dobby Dobby Do." And Darth and Joe said, "What's going on, Dobby Dobby Do?" And Dobby Dobby Do explained to them that he had just very successfully jumped out and scared a big, heavy guy named Blart or Mark or Fark or something like that, and that the guy got so scared that he fell down into the marshmallow pit. And Dobby Dobby Do was so proud of himself. And Dobby Dobby said, and Dobby Dobby Do said, "Dobby Dobby Toe, no. Dobby Dobby Blow, no. Dobby Dobby Ho, no. Dobby Dobby So, no. Well, Dobby Dobby Do said, Dobby Dobby Do, Dobby Dobby Do!" And Joey Ramone said, "Very good, Joey Dobby Do. That's a good job. Well, you get back to work now. We have to keep going." Okay, dee-do, said Dobby Dobby Do, and he went back in his room, and he was reading some comic books. Now, the Ramones with Alfonso said, "Huh?" Alfonso said, "Who was that guy?" And the Ramones, Johnny explained, "Well, that was Dobby Dobby Do. He's hired here in the pit of death to jump out and startle people, but he doesn't always get it right." That's how Joey talked. "Wow," said Alfonso. "Well, that's not very scary. This is a pretty easy pit of death so far. But you don't have to put your arm around me like that, Tommy." "Huh? Tommy? Tommy's over there. He doesn't have your arm around you," said Joey. "Well, who's Joey, Johnny, Dee? Oh, Dee Dee, would you quit scratching the back of my neck?" said Alfonso. And Dee Dee said, "Huh? I'm over here. Oh, then, wait, Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, Tommy. Is there another Ramone here? No, it's just the 4 of us. Then who's..." And he looked behind him, and it was the arm of a big, hairy spider that was dangling from the ceiling. This was one of the new inventions that Darth and Joe had created for the pit of death. And it started grabbing him, and he said, "Ah!" And Johnny said, "Don't worry." And so Johnny said, "Don't worry, Alfonso." And he took out his guitar and went clang and made a huge note, and the spider started shaking. And he let go, and the spider was vibrating, and he couldn't move. And the Ramones kept going, and the spider went back up his web. And Alfonso said, "Thanks." "Oh, no problem," said Johnny. And they kept going. And then they heard a voice. "Help, help." "Huh? Is that another monster?" said Alfonso. "Doesn't sound like that to me," said Joey. And Joey used his incredibly loud voice, because he is the singer of the Ramones, to say, "What's the problem?" And he yelled so loud that he actually scared away a lot of the goblins and trolls and hobgoblins in the area. And the voice said, I'm in a giant pit of marshmallows and there's something electric in here. Because as you may know, there's an electric snake in the marshmallow pit, which tends to make the marshmallows toasty and delicious to eat, but is also quite scary if you happen to be stuck in there with the marshmallows at the time. And he starts making you think, maybe the snake thinks I'm a marshmallow. And that's exactly what Flarp was thinking. His name was Flarp now, as he was stuck in the marshmallow pit. And Joey said, we know where the marshmallow pit is. Come on, guys. And the Ramones started running. Might as well help out another traveler in the pit of death. And so all of them started jogging down the hall, and they turned right at the ramp that led down to falling into the marshmallow pit. And Alfonso started slipping, but Tommy grabbed one of his drumsticks, and he reached out, and Alfonso grabbed it, and he pulled him back up, and he said, you have to be very careful down this ramp. And they carefully walked down next to the walls, and they peered over the edge, and sure enough, the light from one of the torches on the walls that lit up the marshmallow pit let them see that this guy named Toothbrush was in the middle of the marshmallows trying to move around. So the Ramones leaned over the top and said, hey down there, who are you? And he yelled up and said, I think my name is Captain Marshmallow Pit Googly Goo. And the Ramones said, oh, we're the Ramones. I'm Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy, and this is our friend Alfonso. He's not actually a Ramone, we're just showing him around in the pit of the death. How can we get you out, Captain Marshmallow Pit Googly Goo? No, I think now my name is trapped in Marshmallow Pit forever. This guy changes his name a lot, doesn't he? Whispered Johnny to Joey Ramone. And Joey said, yeah, but we should help him out anyway. So Dee Dee Ramone took some, Dee Dee was the bass player. Bass guitar has very thick strings. And he took some extra strings he had from his bass guitar, and he dangled them down, dangled a very long one down into the marshmallow pit. And he said, Captain Marshmallow Pit, or whatever your name is, my name is Shoe. Okay? Well, Shoe, grab this string. So they pulled Shoe up with the bass guitar string. Oh, it's great to be up here. Well, it's good to have you with us, Shoe, said Joey. No, my name is Dirty Sock. He said, oh, okay, it's good to have you up here, Dirty Sock. Dirty Smock. Well, you change your name a lot, don't you? My people change our names a lot, yes. Well, what's your name now? Exactly. What's your name? What's your name is my name. I like that. I'll keep it. And so they walked away from the giant marshmallow pit, and they were walking down a deep downhill corridor that led down to level 3. So there they were, walking down to level 3. It was Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, Tommy, Alfonso, and Onionhead. Onionhead's last name was Laughter, as you might know. So they were down on level 3, and level 3 was very cold that time of day. It's cold here. Well, maybe I can warm things up, said Tommy, and he started playing the drums so fast against the rock floor. Sparks started flying, and pretty soon it heated up the air. And then Tommy, while he was playing, he told Dee Dee to pull some spare drumsticks out of the pack in his back, where he keeps his extra drumsticks. Take out 3 drumsticks, and so Dee Dee did. Toss them in front of my drumsticks, and he did, and they caught on fire, and it made a little fire on the floor. Hey, that's a great trick. So now they were warming themselves up by the fire. Well, fire does scare away a lot of monsters, but unfortunately, it also attracts monsters. And you know what kind of monster it attracts? A dragon. That's right, because dragons are always curious when they see or hear or smell or taste fire. They're curious to know if there's another dragon around producing the fire. That's fire-breathing dragons. They want to know. And so they heard the sound, the sort of shuffling sound, like this. Something's coming, said Joey. And Nostril Head said, "Oh, something's coming." And what's your name now? Pigeonfoot. Pigeonfoot? Yes, and I don't want something to come. I'm getting scared. Don't worry, said Johnny. You've got the Ramones to protect you. And Alfonso here. And Alfonso said, "That's right. What, Pigeonfoot? No, no, that's not my name. My name is Scared Out of My Head." And he started running in circles. And he ran right into a wall and fell unconscious. So, well, their unconscious friend was lying down, having a very nice dream. Luckily for him, he wasn't dreaming about monsters. He was dreaming about banana peels. And that's why he said in his sleep, "My name is Banana Peel Face," which was his new name at the moment. So they decided they'd have to carry him until he woke up. And they started carrying him down the corridor. He was kind of heavy, but the Ramones were pretty strong, especially Johnny. He's the strongest Ramone. He did most of the carrying. Little Tommy's not very strong. I mean, he's the fastest drummer, but Joey, he's a pretty tall guy. So they decided that Joey and Johnny, the two J-sounding Ramones, Joey and Johnny, would carry Banana Peel Face down the corridor on level 3. Well, Alfonso actually found the hole to level 4. He found it by tripping. Whoop! Oh, what was that? You tripped over this hole. And he looked on the ground. Good thing you didn't fall into it. And Alfonso looked down the hole, and there were biting shark creatures. They were mechanical sharks that Darth and Joe had built. At the bottom of this hole. "Oh, I don't want to go down there," said Alfonso. "But that's the way," said Tommy. "The way to what?" "The way to level 4. Look, it's down. Level 4 is lower than level 3. We should go down there." "But what about the mechanical they look like they're going to eat us up." "Well, they need to eat something, that's for sure," said Tommy. He took out a bunch of drumsticks, threw them down all at once, and they all landed in the mouth of the shark, keeping their mouths open. The top of the drumstick was on the roof of their mouth, and the bottom of the drumstick was on their lower jaw, and none of them could close their mouths. They were all going, "Arr, arr, arr, arr," and the drumsticks were bending just a little bit, but not breaking. So they decided to lower themselves down. They crawled down a guitar string that Johnny lowered down into level 4, and they swung over the heads of the mechanical sharks who were in a sort of mechanical pond. And Tommy reached over and grabbed all the drumsticks out, but then they were on land, so the sharks didn't get them. "These'll still work," said Tommy, and he put him back into his pack. And just then, the guy that they thought whose name was Banana Peel Face woke up, and they said, "Banana Peel Face, are you okay?" "What are you talking about? My name is Shoebroken." "Shoebroken?" "That's right. Shoe Toboggan Broken Head Nostril." "Shoe Toboggan Broken Head Nostril? Your name changes awfully quickly," said Johnny Ramone. "Yes, that's the way of my people, but you can call me Dirthead." "Okay, I will call you Dirthead," said Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy. They all said it at the same time, so they really meant, "We will call you Dirthead." And he said, "Why will you call me Dirthead? You just said that's your name." "But my name is Broken Light Bulb." "Oh, okay. We're not going to ask you your name anymore. You can ask me my name. It's Floop." "Floop? No, Droop. Droop? No, Coop." Okay. "Let's just go, whoever you are. How do you know that was my name?" Okay. So they started walking down level 4. As you know, that's the most dangerous of the levels, except for level 5, which was newly constructed in the Pit of Death. All right. So they were walking down level 4 in the Pit of Death, all of them together, when they turned the corner, and suddenly, to their surprise, they saw the creature that was making the scratchy sounds before, and it was a dragon. How did it get down to level 5? It took a shortcut. There was an escalator on the other end of the hallway, and the dragon had heard them go down the hole, and had curled around and suddenly was facing them. This was an incredibly scary dragon. It was big. It had wings. They could tell it was fire-breathing because there was smoke coming out of its nose. And Alfonso said, "Yikes." And the guy who used to be called Broken Light Bulb said, "How do you know my name was Yikes?" And Joey, Johnny, G.D., and Tommy said, "We seem to be confronted with a large dragon." And they turned around to run the other way, but the dragon swooped his tail around so it was in front of them. So now the dragon's head was on this side, in front, on one side of them, and his tail was all the way down the hallway and curled around, so they couldn't get out that way because it looked like a very dangerous tail indeed. And so they were in big trouble. "We have to get out of here," they said. "I don't want to fight a dragon," said Tommy. "I'm not afraid of any dragon," said Johnny. "Oh, no," said Joey. "Go ahead and tell the dragon that." Well, I'll tell him later. I'll send him a letter after we get out of here." "Okay, we have to, maybe we can feed him something." And they tried. Pizza, because Joey Ramone always has pizza on him, because that's the only thing he eats. Suddenly Burp said, "Huh? What's going on? Who are you now?" "No, I'm not who. My name is Burp," said Burp. "And there seems to be a dragon around us. I never knew things were going to get this scary. We have to find a way out of here." And Tommy said, "We could try beating him with drumsticks. Everybody take a drumstick." And so they all started beating on the dragon's tail with a drumstick. "Beat together." And they turned around, and especially Kangaroo Head looked around at the dragon's face and said, "He's laughing." And sure enough, the dragon wasn't scared at all or hurt by these drumsticks. He was laughing. "You think that's scary? How about this?" And he blew fire, and all the drumsticks turned into crisps. And they burned away. "I think it's time to run and Panic." "How do you know my name was Panic?" said Panic. "Ah!" And they started running in circles, but there was nowhere for them to go. And up here, they heard a voice. And they looked around, there was nobody there. And suddenly, Joey, who had the longest hair, felt something tug on his hair. "The dragon has me, the dragon has me." "No, up here." And he looked, and up from the ceiling were 3 salamander-type lizards. Each one had hooked onto the tail of the other, and they formed a sort of rope. And Joey reached his hand up, and they pulled him up. These were incredibly strong salamander lizards. They pulled him up into a tiny corridor, well, it was an opening in the ceiling. And then Joey reached down and grabbed Johnny, who pulled himself up. And then Johnny lowered his guitar, and Dee Dee grabbed the guitar and got pulled up. Tommy grabbed onto the end of Dee Dee's foot and pulled himself up. Alfonso grabbed onto Tommy's leg but started slipping, so Tommy reached down and grabbed Alfonso, and that left Smelly Towel, who was down there alone. So quickly, Dee Dee Ramone lowered a bass guitar string down to Cucumber Head and pulled him up. And he pulled them up into the hole just as the dragon was snapping his jaws and about to devour them all. So they got in there and they said, "Who are you guys?" We're Hinky, Binky, and Twinkie. We're the lizards. We're having a great time in this pit of death, and we were watching you the whole time from our level in the small corridors. You guys are funny, especially you. What's your name?" And he pointed over to Trouserhead. "Oh, my name is Broken Cucumber Face." Well, the salamander said, "Well, you did a great job. We thought you were funny. Come on with us." And they squeezed down a medium-sized corridor, which was in between the tiny corridors and the big one, and it was a new way out of the pit of death. And they crawled out, and Darth and Joe said, "Did you enjoy your adventure?" And they all started laughing, said, "It was great." And Alfonso said, "Yes, but I don't think I ever want to go in there alone. I'm glad I had my friends to help me out. My friends, the salamanders, you guys were great. Hinky, Binky, and Twinkie. And you, the Ramones, Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy. And you, Broken Cucumber Face, you were great too." "Huh? Who are you calling Broken Cucumber Face? Isn't that your name?" "No, my name is the Pit of Breath." So they all went home, including Smelly Sock, who had one of the most fun days of his life. The end. When Cauliflower Breath got home, this is a little epilogue at the end. When Cauliflower Breath got home, he greeted his family, who were chair spring and bed cover, light bulb paint, and the rest of the family, that was his brothers. His brothers was named the rest of the family. And so when Epilogue got home and he saw his family, he was so happy, and that was his name, Happy, that because they had years ago run out of normal names like George and Dave and Fred, and now mostly they were named Small Piece of Corn on the Bottom of My Shoe, and elf type thing stuck to the roof and starting to fall off was the name of his daughter. So Super Soaker and all of the banana people lived happily ever after in their house, which sometimes they called Pinky and sometimes they called Frog. The end. And now the painful part of the tape where I sing you a little song. It goes something like this. In fact, it goes exactly like this. On top of spaghetti, all covered with cheese, I lost my poor meatball when somebody sneezed. It rolled off the table, bonk, and onto the floor. And then my poor meatball, it rolled out the door. It rolled in the alley, and I decided to name it Fractal. And then my poor meatball was eaten by a supersonic pterodactyl. Once upon a time, back when Darth Vader was just barely 3 years old and Joe was just turning 1 year old, they decided to make blueberry pancakes at their mom's house. And their mom decided to let them for some reason. Well, they were making a big mess. They couldn't really reach anything. And Joe said, "I got back." And Darth said, "What?" "I got back." "Oh, you'll be right back. Where are you going?" And Joe didn't answer him. He crawled out of the house to the back, where his friend Charlie, who was a very young Time Lord of only 412 years of age, was back there. And Joe explained to him, "I want to be back," which meant that he wanted to be older so he could reach more things. And so 1 second later, he came back into the house, and he was walking, and he was 3 years old. He was as old and as tall as Darth. "Huh? Is that you, Joe?" "Yes. I decided that maybe I could reach better this way." "What? How'd you get so tall?" "Oh, I eat a lot of milk and vegetables. It helps me grow." "Okay." And so they tried to reach. They pulled some chairs out and they tried to reach some flour down, and they were starting to spill it. And Joe said, "Oh, I'll be right back." "Where are you going now?" "I'll be right back." And he ran out of the house, and he came back 1 second later. He was 5 years old. "Huh? Hey, you're taller than me." "That's right, because I'm 5. 5? But you were just 1 year old a second ago." "Yes, but I'm 5 years old now. Thus, I can reach the flour." And he used the word "thus," which 3-year-olds don't even know about. And so he reached the flour and he pulled it down, and they got a bowl out from a cabinet, but the blueberries were still too high to reach. And Joe said, "Oh, I'll be right back, Darth." And he ran out back and came back again, and suddenly he came in as a 7-year-old. Now he was a lot taller than Darth. "Huh? Oh, I was tired of being shorter than you and always having you reach things for me and always having you be better than me at stuff because you were older, so I decided to be 7. "You decided to be 7? "Yes, I can reach the blueberries now." And he reached up and he couldn't quite reach it. Wait a second, I'll be right back." "No!" And he ran out back, came back, and he was 9 years old. Now Darth was only 3 years old, and Joe was 9 years old. "This is very strange," said Darth. And Joe said, "Well, I grew quickly. I'm a fast-growing boy." "But I'm a fast-growing boy," said Darth. "Not as fast as me," said Joe. And Joe reached up and got the blueberries down. And they started to make the blueberry pancakes. They got some baking soda out, but they needed to fry them in the big frying pan. And that was even too tall for a 9-year-old to reach. So Joe said, "I'll be right back." And Darth said, "Not again." And Joe went in the backyard and came back a second later, and he was 11 years old. And he still couldn't reach it, so he ran back and came back again. He was 13 years old. Now Darth was only 3 years old, and Joe was 13 years old. He was a teenager. "Hey, Darth." "Hey, Joe. What, is that you?" "That's right. How'd you get to be so tall?" "Oh, I eat a lot of blueberry pancakes." And he got down to the pan, and they made blueberry pancakes, and Darth ate all that he could. He was trying to show off, so he ate 7 blueberry pancakes. Well, Joe ate a stack as tall as Darth, 37 blueberry pancakes in one gulp, because he was a teenager and he was still growing fast. "Oh, those are good, but we'll need to make more." "We don't have any more," said Darth. We need more blueberries." And Joe said, "Well, we can go get more blueberries." And Darth said, "How are we going to get them? The store is closed." It was Sunday and the store was closed. "Well, we can go pick them from the blueberry trees. Those are too tall even for a giant Joe," said Darth. "We'll see about that," said Joe. And he went out back, and he came back, and suddenly Joe was 30 years old. He was all grown up. He was enormous. "You're enormous," said Darth. "Oh, you will be too when you're 30. 30? But you were just 1 year old a second ago. So we need some blueberries." So they went out to the blueberry patch, which was on the other side of the volcano, and Darth brought a basket. Actually, Darth just rode on Joe's shoulders the whole way because Joe was 30 years old. And Darth brought a basket, and Joe reached up and put Darth down, and he picked the blueberries, which were very high because all the low-lying blueberries had already been picked, and he dropped them into Darth's basket, and pretty soon the basket got very heavy for Darth, so Joe picked up the basket with one hand and picked up Darth with the other hand and started walking back home, and then they felt the earth shaking. "Did you feel the earth shaking?" asked Darth. "Yes," said Joe. Joe's voice was kind of deep. He was 30 years old now. "But what is it?" "It looks like that," and he pointed. And Joe, even though he was 30 years old, he had never seen a volcano erupt before, because just a few seconds ago he was only 1 year old. And so Darth and Joe didn't know what to do. Suddenly the volcano was exploding. Throwing pyroclastic projectiles into the air, and ash and molten rock formerly called magma, and now called lava, as it flowed down the side of the hill. Well, Darth and Joe quickly ran out of the way, and they didn't have they didn't have their rings of transportation. This was before any of that. So they just had to run, like the Dickens, as they say. Run, 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 run. He ran back to the house, but the lava was coming toward the town. They had to do something quickly. So they were running back toward the house, and Joe ran over a little hole in the ground. Well, to him it was little, but to Darth it was big, and Darth fell. Ah! Joe quickly reached down and grabbed him mid-air because Joe's arm was so long, and pulled Darth up. Ugh. "Be careful of that hole. We've got to get back to the house." "But why?" said Darth. "The lava's just going to melt the house and all the houses." "You're right," said Joe. "What are we going to do?" And Darth said, "There must be something we can do, some way of deflecting the lava so it doesn't flow toward the house." And that's when Joe had a brilliant idea. The lava was coming right for the town where they lived, so he had to get a shovel out from the garage, which he quickly did, and he was so big and strong that he could quickly dig a long ditch from where the lava was coming and curve it around away from the town toward that hole that Darth fell into. And he just finished right. It was getting very hot outside, and the lava was flowing and flowing and flowing, and it fell into that ditch that Joe dug, that long ditch, and it started flowing down, and finally it flowed into the hole and filled up that hole with lava, which solidified into volcanic rock and saved the town. Whew. And Darth said, "Oh, I wonder what that lava looks like now that it's all solidified into the shape of the hole. We could find out exactly what that hole looks like if we only could get the lava out." Joe said, "I'll be right back." And he ran around the back of the house. "Not again," said Darth. And when Joe came back, he was 37 years old, and he was even bigger and stronger. And he attached some ropes to the what used to be lava was now cooled off into the shape of rocks as a few hours had gone by. And he pulled and pulled. He started pulling the lava out, and he used his enormous strength. Joe Vader pulled the entire block of lava out of the hole, and it looked like a giant reindeer. That hole is the shape of a reindeer, said Darth. And that is how they discovered Reindeer Hole. Now they had a sculpture made out of volcanic rock, the shape of a reindeer, and they knew the exact shape of that hole. And that is the first hole they explored into. That's why they were so good at exploring the pit of death and building one later, because they practiced by exploring this perfectly safe empty hole in the ground, which was the shape of a reindeer. And why was it the shape of a reindeer? Because it was Reindeer Hole. Many, many, many years ago, that's where a magic reindeer lived, and someday, the legend has it that the reindeer will come back to his home. And now Darth and Joe know where his home is, and they'll be waiting, so they will be able to meet the magic reindeer in the future when he comes back to that hole. The end. Now it's time to say the end. The end of the tape. Now it's time to turn into an ape. Now it's time to sing the end. The end of the tape. Now it's time to sing the end. Goodbye, Darth and Joe. See you later with another adventure of a magic reindeer of the future. Goodbye, filling up the rest of the tape. The rest of the tape. Filling up the tape. Gleebly, gleebly, glabe. Hey, how'd you know my name was Gleebly, gleebly, glabe?